everybody, and welcome back to the channel. If you have not already subscribed, please click the button below. Before we dive into today's video, I'd like to give a shout out to Toys for Tots here in Madison, Wisconsin. If you'd like to make a donation, please click the link in the description below. Today we have something very special. We have Dark Side Anakin from Hot Toys. This figure was released about 2 years ago, and let me tell you, it was a long 2 years. Quickly, I'd like to make a shout out to Roger Baumgarten, who hooked me up with this. He's an absolutely wonderful human being. Anyway, let's dive in. Okay, so starting with his accessories, his hands here, we can see, clearly you've got a great skincare regimen, Anakin. But the veins, the knuckles, very appreciable with that sculpt. Next, we've got the lightsaber here, and as always, looks phenomenal. It is not made out of metal, it is made out of plastic. Next, we have his mechanical hand. I do think this is a nice addition, especially since you can individually flex the fingers. I don't think I will personally be using this in my own collection, but it's a nice option. Who knows? Maybe I'll change my mind. Next, we've got his gloved hands, and they look like they have a leathery texture, but they don't. Nevertheless, they're pretty nice. Okay, finally, on to the Mustafar panning droid. This looks phenomenal. Oh my gosh, look at that! Oh! Anyway, the base does have a crotch grabber that you can insert to it, like I've shown here. If you don't use it, there's a little piece that inserts in the back and covers that hole. Now, if you look at the base, you'll see that there's an on-off switch. It does light up. There is a little bit of flickering, and that's just the frame rate with my phone, so I apologize for that. But I will say, in a dimly lit room, lit up, it does look wonderful. Okay, let's get to the star of the show, Anakin, with his robes on here. He looks absolutely menacing. Whew, I love it. The robe is wired, giving you plenty of opportunity to shape it. Next, I'd like to take a look at Anakin without his robe on. Looking a little further at his suit, it's made out of this faux leather material that has a wonderful texture. The shoulder pads, they do have what feels like wires in them, so I do believe that you'll be able to shape his shoulder pads to your choosing. Now, unfortunately, those wires are only limited to the shoulders, and they do not extend below the belt. So, here you can see he has the same material in the back as he does in the front. Underneath the faux leather pieces of his suit are the cotton portions of his robes, and the cotton is the same cotton that we've seen in other 6 scales, so it's pretty basic, but still pretty nice. And I do believe it is the same material that's used to make the pants as well, with just a different dye. Okie dokie. So as for his belt, it does have a few of what looks like metal components on it, in addition to some leather pouches in the back. Frankly, I'm not exactly sure what these are, but they look metal. However, I believe they're plastic, so don't be fooled. There is a Velcro patch on the belt, so you can adjust its tightness and height. Alright, so moving on to the boots, they're made out of this similar faux material. However, I think the leather is a little bit more rigid, which is nice for the standing boots. I do really like the sort of texture in the overall build of these boots. They're quite solid. And the tread on the bottom, looks like he's got some Timberlands here, so nice, man. Rock the fashion, Annie. Along Anakin's right arm, we've got this unique sleeve that appears to have these metal bands on it. However, the metal bands are just made of plastic, and the whole sleeve is a plastic unit. It would be nice, however, if it was made out of leather, but that's just a small critique. Now that we're finished with the textures of his suit, why don't we go ahead and take a closer look at Anakin's best feature, his eyes. Woo! Look at those! Oh my gosh, these are the main selling point of Dark Side Anakin, in my opinion. I would just like to give you a moment to appreciate those eyes. Anyway, let's go ahead and move on to the hair sculpt. The hair sculpt is the same as the light side Anakin, so don't expect anything different, but they both look great. Okay guys, it's that time. Let's go ahead and move on to the articulation. Starting with his head, we have full movement, side to side, up and down. However, there is a problem with his hair. I noticed that the hair does catch on the collar of his robe, so be careful when you're moving his head regularly because the hair might actually cause a bunch of friction and lead some of those threads to separate. Now, maybe that's just my Anakin, but I did want to mention it in case other people out there experience the same problem. As for the front of his collar, fortunately, I have not noticed any issues. Okay, moving on to articulation, we'll start with the shoulders. You'll notice here that the shoulders are actually limited in how high he can raise them by the shoulder pads. Hopefully that's not much of an issue for most of you. I only anticipate that actually becoming a problem when you're trying to put him into some hyperdynamic poses, where he's jumping around and doing flips and tricks and all of his Anakin things. Anyway, going back to the shoulder joint and the elbow joint, they move as expected, which is excellent. It's really the same figure as the previous Anakin, the good side Anakin, so you can expect the same body and the same articulation. Moving on to his waist, there is some restriction of motion, but I think that's because of the leather suit and the belt, so if you want to adjust that, you can probably just loosen up his main belt. Moving lower to his hips, the hips are restricted slightly by the pants, but overall they do provide great range. And next with his knees, the knees do bend quite a bit, which is great, especially if you want him to be in a sort of jumping pose. And finally, the ankles. The ankles are actually quite mobile, which is awesome. Something you definitely need in a figure like this, where ankle stability is key. So hopefully with these relatively mobile ankle joints, you'll be able to afford a lot of nice standing and potentially even lunging or jumping poses. Well, that about does it for Anakin, so why don't we go ahead and move on over to the final impression. Dark Side Anakin is an absolute gem. I am so happy that I picked him up, and I really hope that you can too. His eyes are phenomenal. They're the centerpiece of this figure. And I really do think that whether or not you choose to pose him with the Mustafar panning droid, he will be an amazing addition to your collection. I just really wish that he were cheaper. Anyway, until next time everybody, I'll see you in the future.